My name's Ailey. I'm a member of the Young People's panel for Scottish Cycling, and I'm here with Craigie, and she's going to give us a bit of insight today on and some information for Women and Girls in Sports Week. So, my first question is, what do you think is the biggest barrier that women and girls face when it comes to sport? What do you think is the kind of main thing that's stopping them from participating?
Well, I know when I was a wee girl, there weren't that many images in the media or that many role models other than my mum and her friends that were out there being sporty and being really active. So I was really lucky, I guess, because I had my mum as a role model. But I think on balance, there weren't that many other women that I could aspire to be like. And so I think it's much better now, but I still think that it's not that fairly represented in our images just yet. I think sport is quite often considered something sort of tough and macho and not something that is accessible to everybody if you don't identify as tough and macho. It's definitely loads better than it used to be, but we still got work to do, I think, to make this an accessible thing for everybody.
Perfect. So what do you think, especially through kind of your role as well, what do you think is kind of the crucial step that we can take to kind of start to remove that barrier, obviously with kind of creating positive role models for kind of young girls and older women who are wanting to get involved in sport?
Yeah, and interestingly, I think the more I do the work that I do, interestingly, I think we need to be creating role models for young men too, because there's more than one way to do sport. There's more than one way to be competitive and be active. And it doesn't need to be like, you don't need to be testosterone fueled and charging and conquering all the time. You can be active without necessarily needing to necessarily embrace that one way of being in sport. Definitely in the sorts of sports that I've been involved in lately, the more endurance, solo, adventure type sport, I guess I found a bit of a different niche where really all I'm competing against is myself and my own mind and the environment and having to manage myself in a different way. And that's not your traditional sporting model. But how about we start some conversations that is, what does it mean for you to be sporty? What does it mean for you to move your body? What is it that you're trying to express by doing that? Is it that you're just wanting to beat other people and be better and stronger than other people? Or is it about something much more individual? I think that's a lovely thing for boys and men to hear too, isn't it? That you don't need to be this total hero the whole time. You can be vulnerable and a bit crap sometimes too, and actually that might make you a better athlete. So yeah, I think having those conversations, showing that you can be yourself and also do stuff physically, that you don't always need to put on the lycra or the strip and go out there and be a conquering hero. There's lots of different ways to do this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So it seems a bit weird to be talking about women's involvement in sport and obviously to not mention the Adventure Syndicate. And I'm sure there's quite a lot of viewers here that either don't know what it is or maybe haven't heard of it. And I think it's obviously a really crucial role in your kind of career with women's involvement in sport. So if you want to just give a kind of summary or a kind of run over of what it is and how it kind of promotes that involvement for women.
Okay, so the Adventure Syndicate is a collective of adventurers who are women or identify as female. And the idea behind it was, so I used to compete in mountain biking, and I sort of felt the whole time that I was doing that, I loved it, but I felt a little bit like the bike industry wasn't quite ready to give women and men an equal footing when I was doing it. So the idea behind the Adventure Syndicate was to set up this group of women, not shouting about the fact that we're women, but just going out there and doing our thing, and presenting this alternative female sporting role model for anybody that was interested. So just that stuff that we were talking about before, how cooperation and collaboration and care and nurture can actually be performance enhancing, and that it doesn't always need to be about this sort of aggressive conquering, which I guess in adventure historically, that is kind of how it's been in the past. So yeah, the idea is that you make it your own, and you go out there and you draw strength from other people, and if you're a bit scared, you pair up with those people and you adventure with them. But ultimately, it's about doing what makes you feel good, and about not looking around always to see, oh, am I doing this right? Am I doing this well? Am I doing this bravely? Am I strong enough to do this? Am I the right body shape to do this? Am I the right colour to do this? It's this stuff is accessible to anybody, but they might just need a different hand to get out there and to learn how to do it. So that was what the Adventure Syndicate was all about, trying to give people the permission to be whoever they were in an outdoor adventurous context.
So obviously another part of the Adventure Syndicate and your career a lot is to do with outdoor activity, and that kind of adventure idea. But I was wondering how you feel, obviously, with women's involvement in sport, and the kind of stereotypes and stigma that comes along with that. How you feel, how important it is to have that kind of outdoor element, to do with kind of involvement in sport, and what that can give the women that then participate in that.
Yeah, so my background, I trained as an outdoor instructor and then a child and adolescent psychotherapist, and brought those two things together because I think the power of being outside and in nature and being active and outside in nature, that's what we're built to do, it's cut through our DNA. Take us back a few thousand years and that was when we were at our happiest. And I think now, as a nation, as a population, as a human race, we're removed from that a little bit. We spend a lot of time inside, and we forget what it feels like to be a bit cold and a bit uncomfortable, and to really sort of feel those elements and get in touch with how it is that we are supposed to be, how we're programmed to be, to live on the planet. But that can make you feel so good, being physically active, it releases those endorphins, but so does connecting with nature. And if you can pull those two things together, then, well, in my opinion, you've won a watch. But there are barriers there, real barriers, because people think that it's this sort of, you need to have special equipment and you need to have been trained and stuff, and it's dangerous, and you'll probably get a bit dirty and cold, and all those things might be true to a certain extent, but that feeling that you get when you've taken a bit of a risk at something, or you've been a little bit uncomfortable, and how good you feel afterwards, that stuff is just magnified if you're doing stuff outdoors, especially in wild places. So that's the idea behind co-joining being physical and being outside. And I think it's really important. And I think it's really important that women and girls feel that that's their place too. We're all born of nature, all part of being outside. It doesn't matter what gender you identify with. I think it's really important for just a human being.
Yeah, perfect. So obviously we talked a bit earlier about kind of role models, because obviously you said that's obviously was a barrier, especially to you, even when you were growing up. But how important do you think that role model and that community is for girls, be it a community of girls or a community of mixed gender? What do you feel? What are your kind of opinions on that community or that need for community in sports?
Well, I wouldn't want to answer for everybody. I can answer that question for me. Really, really important. That's really important for me. Although I really like spending time solo, doing adventurous things, like I think a full wilderness immersion, going for days on end on your bike in one direction, not speaking to a soul. That gives me an awful lot of energy to do that. But equally, I really love sharing those moments with other people. And even if I'm out doing solo stuff, knowing that I've got that community of other people that understand why I'm doing it and give me support if I'm struggling, and I can reach out to them. It's so important to have that community of people that understand the importance of what it is that I'm doing. So I think it's different for different people, but from the work that I've done, I know that community gives a bit of confidence to people that wouldn't otherwise go out there and want to do stuff themselves. And I know that, you know, if there's a bit of a scary thing coming up, then I'm much more inclined to do that thing if I've got someone else with me, someone else that I trust with me. So it's both. I think it's almost like community gives you the confidence to grow, and then you've got choices. Then you can know, well, I can do this on my own, and that's an amazing feeling. Or I can go and have a really sociable time with these lovely people that also give me that confidence. So I think as a starter, it's so important.
Yeah. So our second last question here is, obviously it's really important for a whole to have that accessibility for a whole range of age groups. But obviously one that suffers the most and obviously will kind of impact later in life is that kind of younger age group. And I know you've done a lot of experience in kind of talking with schools and stuff like that. And I'm sure the kind of people watching will have clubs with young people or possibly kind of school groups or clubs and stuff like that. And what do you think that they can do to kind of promote this women and girls kind of incorporation in the sport without kind of forcing it upon them, just giving that, how would they kind of promote that opportunity?
Well, I guess it depends a little bit on the sport, doesn't it? And again, you know, I don't want to talk for everybody, but I can talk for me and how that felt when I was young, and I almost had to wait for adults to give me permission to get involved in something, because I could drive a car, and it was actually quite difficult to get about. What I loved the most was that feeling of being independent, of that autonomy. So if I could get myself to a club, or if I could take myself on an adventure, that's why the bike was such a tool for, you know, such a tool for emancipation for me, because it meant suddenly I could get around. I could, you know, or running from your door. That was amazing to me. Suddenly I'm not beholden to anybody. I can get myself places. So there's something about autonomy that I think is really important when we're talking about getting young people involved. It's got to be something that they want to do. And what better way to prove that they want to do it by being able to get themselves there, you know, actually physically there and be present. So I think that's something to consider when we're trying to engage young people in our chosen sport. And I suppose the other thing is just always bearing in mind that, and this is something that I think organised sport doesn't always do all that well. Sometimes it absolutely ticks all the boxes for young people, but sometimes there's lots of different motivations for being physically active, and especially being physically outdoors and active. Some people want to get physically stronger and fitter. Some people might want to lose weight. Some people might want to use it as a tool to get about. Some people might want to meet other people. Some people might be using it to avoid other people. And so there's so many different types of motivation that goes into somebody doing anything, whether that's sport or anything. I think it's really important that leaders take a moment to find out what that motivation is for that young person, rather than just saying, this is our thing, get involved, you're going to love it, because that might not necessarily be the case. And if it's not the case for them, finding out what would make that young person tick, how to get that young person active in whatever means they can conceive of it, and then channeling them in the right direction for their chosen thing, rather than trying to force them into this mold of being a cyclist or being a swimmer or being a football player.
Yeah, perfect. And the last question, which is obviously one that's quite prevalent now, is to do with COVID. So obviously it's flipped kind of everything and everyone on their heads, and it's obviously changed a lot of the kind of dynamics, especially for kind of sports, obviously not being able to actually participate in sports, and a lot of stuff with the kind of Adventure Syndicate is obviously a lot of face-to-face, a lot of training, a lot of kind of communication, like where you have to be physically there, and I think a lot of clubs and just everyone is kind of struggling with that, kind of adapting to this kind of new world we're in. So I was wondering if you have either come across a few solutions yourself, or if you have any kind of advice for clubs or people who are just, even, you know, girls who are wanting to participate in sport, but obviously it's a very kind of tough time to do so. So I was wondering if you've come across anything that you thought would help.
Such a hard time,
I
isn't it?
know.
Especially if you're just talking about getting motivated by other people and groups of other people, and then suddenly you can't actually physically meet somebody to go for a run, or you can't meet somebody to play rugby. Yeah, you can't go to training, or if you do, then it's massively different. So hard. And if you're talking about stepping into those circles now, like for the first time already, it's pretty daunting. And now we're just like, oh, I'm not quite sure what the extra rules are. And the Adventure Syndicate had a few training camps, and it had a few trips organised, and had a few challenges that have all had to fall by the wayside. But like everybody else, we're adapting and trying to find new opportunities in this. And it's really interesting, actually, just we were talking about community, just how important the online community has become. So the Adventure Syndicate have women and girls all over the world, actually, but mostly in the UK. And social media has been really, I'm not a massive fan of social media, but sometimes it absolutely comes into its own, doesn't it? So we can be supporting each other, we can be sharing adventure ideas, we can be putting up routes, we can be organising really small groups of people or pairs of people that can go on socially distanced adventures together. We can be just sharing and communicating and collaborating online. And we've adapted our Match the Miles challenge that we do each year to be this sort of online event, so we can have this sense of community online. So you might be out doing your own thing, but you can be checking in online with other people all doing the same thing. So I suppose it's a little bit like those solo adventures I was just describing. I'm on my own, but I'm not alone because I've still got this great supportive network online. So let's use that, I think. I mean, not everybody's online, that's the other thing, and it does sort of take away from your adventure a wee bit if you are online. But I'm sort of reconciling that a little bit at the moment, because I think that's sort of where I'm getting most of my sense of community just at the moment. But I'm also really enjoying those teaming up with one or two other people and staying separate from them, but still exercising in the company of them. So yeah, get your bubble and get them active. That's what I'd say.
Perfect. Well, I just want to thank you so much for your time, and obviously all the amazing advice for it. I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot from it, and it was really, really great to speak to you.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It was to speak to you too. And yeah, I hope you have a good week. Get out and get active.
Hopefully. Thanks so much.
Okay.